Throughout human history, the pursuit of beauty has shaped cultures, influenced destinies, and demanded sacrifices that are almost unimaginable by today's standards. For countless generations, women across the world have strived to attain the ever-shifting ideals of perfection dictated by their societies. These ideals were rarely mere personal preferences. They were expectations woven deeply into the fabric of daily life, dictating status, prospects, and even survival. Yet, the lengths to which women went to conform were often not just challenging, but downright punishing. The story of beauty in ancient times is as much a story of pain as it is of aesthetics. In the grand palaces of ancient Egypt, beauty was power, and both men and women worked meticulously to achieve it. But for women especially, the rituals could be grueling. Smooth, hairless skin was the gold standard, not just on the face or legs, but across the entire body. This meant regular hair removal using tweezers made of seashells or bronze, or a concoction of sugar, oil, and lime that functioned much like modern-day waxing. The process was painful and often left the skin raw and irritated. But the cost of not participating was social exclusion or even ridicule. Cosmetics, too, were essential but not always safe. The famous kohl eyeliner, which accentuated the eyes of queens like Cleopatra, contained light a toxic metal that over time caused headaches, skin disorders, and even organ failure. The desire for a pale complexion led women to dust their faces with white powders made from chalk or crushed minerals, substances that dried out the skin and sometimes poisoned the wearer with repeated use. Perfumes and ointments, meant to mask body odor and signify wealth, were made with animal fats and resins that could clog pores and cause rashes. Traveling east to China, the pursuit of beauty took on its own unique and harrowing forms. None was more infamous than foot binding, a practice that began during the Song dynasty and endured for nearly 1,000 years. Young girls, some as young as 5, had their feet tightly bound with cloth to prevent growth. The arch of the foot would break, the toes would curl under, and the bones would deform, all to achieve the coveted lotus foot, a symbol of high status and feminine beauty. The pain was excruciating, often lasting for years as the feet were repeatedly broken and rebound. Infections were common, sometimes resulting in the loss of toes or even life. Yet unbound feet were considered unattractive and could doom a woman to a life without marriage or security. Japan, too, held strict beauty standards, especially among the noble women and geishas of the imperial court. White faces were prized, symbolizing purity and nobility. Women would painstakingly apply thick layers of rice powder to their faces and necks, striving for an unblemished porcelain look. To achieve the perfect oval face, women sometimes shaved their eyebrows entirely and painted them back on higher, more refined spots. The lips were painted bright red, but only in small heart-shaped patterns, requiring steady hands and hours of practice. Perhaps most striking was the practice of ohaguro teeth blackening. Women and often men would stain their teeth with a mixture of iron filings, vinegar, and tea, resulting in pitch-black teeth. This was considered the height of sophistication, a sign of maturity and beauty. But the process was unpleasant, involving repeated applications that tasted foul and sometimes eroded the enamel, leading to dental problems. Yet, to appear in public without blackened teeth was to be considered unkempt, or even indecent. In India, beauty was synonymous with meticulous grooming and adornment. Ancient texts described elaborate rituals involving scented oils, herbal pastes, and henna. But the aspiration for lighter skin led to the use of bleaching, agents sometimes made with lime or even mercury, which could burn or scar the skin. Nose piercings and heavy jewelry, while beautiful, could cause infections or physical discomfort, but were steadfastly worn as symbols of status and femininity. Turning to ancient Greece and Rome, the ideal woman was pale, delicate, and almost ethereal. To achieve this, women sometimes bled themselves with leeches or drank vinegar to drain color from their cheeks. They applied powders made from white lead, which, like in Egypt, was toxic. To emphasize their eyes, women used soot and ashes, which could cause infections. Hair removal was done with pumice stones, scraping at the skin until it was smooth but often raw and bleeding. In Rome, the unibrow was considered a sign of intelligence and beauty. So women who didn't have one would use dark pigments to paint one on, even as they plucked other facial hair to painful excess. Medieval Europe brought its own strictures. The ideal woman was almost otherworldly: high forehead, pale skin, and slender form. To achieve the high forehead, women plucked or shaved their hairlines, sometimes almost to the crown of the head. This was a slow, painful process, but to have a low hairline was to appear common and unfashionable. Belladonna, or deadly nightshade, was used to dilate the pupils, creating a luminous look. The name hints at its dangers over time. Belladonna could cause blindness. Face powders and rouges were still laced with lead and mercury, continuing the deadly tradition from antiquity. As the Renaissance swept across Europe, beauty became more ornate and demanding. Corsets grew tighter, compressing the waist to almost impossible proportions. Young girls were laced into these garments from an early age, their ribs and internal organs gradually shifting to fit the fashionable silhouette. Breathing was difficult, digestion was impaired, and fainting was common, hence the need for fainting couches in the parlors of the well-to-do. Yet, to be seen without a corset was scandalous, a sign of loose morals and low breeding. Moving into the 17th and 18th centuries, the pursuit of fair skin reached new extremes. Women wore masks made of lead and vinegar overnight, hoping to bleach away freckles and blemishes. They glued mouse fur to their eyelids as false lashes and pasted fabric, beauty patches to their faces to cover scars from smallpox or the side effects of harsh cosmetics. Wigs and hairpieces, often made from human or animal hair, grew ever larger and heavier, sometimes infested with lice, yet powdered and perfumed to mask any unpleasantness. Across the world, the costs of beauty were not only physical but social and psychological. In many cultures, to fail in the pursuit of beauty was to risk social exclusion, economic insecurity, or worse. For women, whose value was often tied to appearance, the stakes were enormous. The rituals of beautification became daily acts of survival, endurance, and sometimes resistance. Yet, within these painful traditions, there was also creativity, resilience, and even rebellion. Women shared remedies for the burns of depilatory pastes, concocted their own soothing ointments, and whispered warnings about the dangers of certain powders. Some found ways to subvert expectations, using natural dyes instead of toxic ones, or finding subtle ways to emphasize their individuality within restrictive norms. The story of beauty in ancient times is not just one of suffering, but of adaptation and ingenuity. Across continents and centuries, women found ways to assert their agency, even in the smallest of choices. The pain endured was often a price paid for dignity, respect, and a sense of belonging in a world that demanded much and offered little in return. Today, looking back, it's easy to marvel at the extremes of these ancient standards, to wonder why anyone would endure such hardship. But the echoes of these practices remain. The modern world still holds up shifting ideals of beauty, and while the tools have changed, the pressure to conform persists. The history of beauty is a reminder, not only of how far we've come, but of how deeply the desire for acceptance and admiration is rooted in the human experience. For every pot of coal, every tightly laced corset, every foot bound or hair plucked, there is a story of a woman navigating the perilous path between societal expectation and personal expression. The pain endured in the name of beauty was real, but so too was the strength and resilience of those who bore it. In remembering their stories, we honor not just the cost of beauty, but the courage it took to pursue it. As we reflect on the lengths women have gone to achieve beauty, we are reminded that true perfection is not in the flawless surface, but in the endurance, creativity, and humanity behind it. The history of beauty is a tapestry woven with both suffering and triumph, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to shape and sometimes to challenge the world's expectations.